I was brought up actually in a bilingual family in Quebec, but it's very much like the situation in Wales in certain ways, because there are not only two languages, but they have kind of unequal weight. And one is sort of invasive and it threatens to take over very often the other. And in our case, it's the French which is weak, which is strange because globally French isn't threatened. But you can understand in the great Anglophone sea of North America, it is. And it's kind of a miracle that there are about 70,000 people speaking French on the banks of the St. Lawrence in 1760 at the conquest, and now the 8 million plus population, majority French speaking, operating in French, and very vibrant culture. So it's been a tremendous struggle, and I think it's it's going on, but it's a great success story. Well, I lived in a bilingual family, so we had friends on both sides, right, who were unilingual, and they would talk about each would talk about the other side, and you were clear they got it wrong. They don't really understand what it's like to be on the other side of the language barrier. So, I mean, you get into a kind of rat race where you're rushing around trying to explain each to the other, which may not pay off. But it really was revelatory for me, because Meredith said quoted a minute ago, the idea that just different labels we put on the same things, what matters is the things. That's which Anglophones tended to believe. Right? That's totally wrong. Obviously, language carries with it a whole set of sensibilities, a sense of humor, sense of history, rhetorical flourishes. I mean, it's just a very different way of being in the world. And the second thing which I'm not diverging with, but I've discovered, is that it's not such a strange predicament. There are large tracts of human history in which people have been bi or multilingual by the nature of things, because they're mixed populations. I think of my Indian friends who have, at least 3 languages. Their native region, let's say Kannada, they come from Carnatic. They learned some Hindi at some point, and then of course they speak English. So they operate in 3 languages, and it's completely normal. That in some contexts use one, in some contexts the other. So this is what made me passionate about language and about understanding that other dimension of language, which is not just recording information. And in order to make the book clearer, what I'm arguing against in the book are theories of language that it's just recording information so that you can remember and you can push the information to someone else to take in. And a lot of the theories in the English-speaking world, English-speaking philosophy about language, have been based on that assumption. But I thought I'd write a book in which I would say, yeah, it does this too, but it does a whole lot of other things, including in conversations. You sort of set up the footing in which you are with people. You can talk down to other people, make them feel they're kind of stupid, and that's one way of being on top, and the other one can maybe struggle against that or maybe accept that. And something that one doesn't have in English, which is fascinating to me, is the modes of address, because in the other language I speak, and in most other languages, there's the difference between tu and vous, that's the intimate address and the more polite address. And you see going on in one's world, sometimes struggles where there's a movement in society towards a much wider spread of the intimate address, right? Particularly when there's a hierarchy, right? So people in the lower part of the hierarchy say, vous, or the polite address upward, and the downward it's tu. And when I was a kid, it's not that long ago, well, that's pretty long ago, but this was even within families. We said vous to our parents, and they said tu to us. That has completely disappeared in Quebec. So there's been a kind of revolution. It's part of the modern revolution of equality. And when I tell my grandchildren about this, they think, Pappy, you come from the Middle Ages. Very, very strange world to them. So there's that whole dynamic that is going on in language, but it's not simply describing the same objects. It's So that is why, that's the connection between my background and I think your background as well, and understanding why someone would write a book like The Language Animal. So is that?
Thank you so much. That's what I switched my mic off because I knew I would just be all the time saying yes, yes. And you're right about the tu and the vu. We have it in Welsh, of course. Chi a ti, like the tu, and then vu is chi. And you're right, it is sort of disappearing. It's still there, and I've noticed, unfortunately, that more and more people are calling me chi, which is the vu. And they say it's respect, and I say no, it's because I'm old, you know. So that's part of the story. But then the cutest thing was when I lived in London for a while, when my children were born, actually, and I remember the mothers around us, they found from London, they thought it was very strange that I would call our neighbours who were older Mrs. somebody or other. And I suppose that was my way of saying vous, because the U obscures it. But somehow I felt that I couldn't just call them Jean or Joan or something. You know, they were older and they needed that respect. But that was not apparent with the London mothers then, shall we say. I don't suppose you'd say just a weeny bit about the HLCs and the rest of them, how you've divided those gangs. I don't know, is that too much to summarize?
Yeah, well, there is the theory of language, which I call the HLC, because they're the three great founders of the philosophy of language in the 17th, 18th century, Hobbes, Locke, and Condillac in France. And their idea is language is mainly this recording of information, and which is useful for, stacking it up and communicating it. And then I use the word HHH, the three H's, for, well, actually there are four, but Hamann, Herder, Humboldt. You could throw Hegel in, maybe you could throw Heidegger in, but leave them out. These people at the time of the Romantic movement in Germany are the ones who developed these remarkably rich theories of language, which are close to theories of literature and and so on. It's completely new. So for me, the great eye opener was Herder's review of Condillac's idea of how language could have originated, right? And so when I read that, I thought, yes, absolutely right. But I was primed to say that by being brought up where I was brought up.
and finally, perhaps, could you say something? Well, I'm sure you agree, that about the benefits of dwelling upon the three H's view of language, the things that we can gain from that, not just in terms of philosophy and understanding, but in terms of society, in terms of the practice of coming together somehow. These things aren't isolated from one another. This understanding. Exactly. I'll be quiet now, and perhaps you could just say something like that, because I think that in Wales, if I may, we are aware of two languages. Of course we are. People have been imprisoned for the minority language, and now we have a policy, and it's a bilingual country and all the signs of bilingual, and we talk about it a lot, but I don't think we talk about it enough in the advantages it can bring us in terms of things like cultural understanding and a harmony, bringing a harmony. I'd like to think that there are advantages like that we haven't quite unlocked yet.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, because in order really to understand somebody else, you have to understand that there's something to understand, something you don't yet understand. If you think of language as just putting different labels on the same boxes or things, well, there's nothing to understand about that. It's what we're doing, what they're doing, so we don't need to worry. But if you become sensitive to this different way of being, then you want to say, well, I don't quite get it. Let me see. So it's very much like the ethnographic situation where Margaret Mead arrives in Melody or whatever, or Malinowski arrives wherever he arrives, and they don't speak the language at all, but they know from the beginning that it's not just a matter of learning the labels. They know from the beginning that it's a completely different way of life, and the people have different concepts to understand this way of life, and they really have to work at it. And there isn't a method. You just have to listen. You have to learn to listen. So it is, if you have this understanding of multilingualism, then you are ready to listen. And you know there's something there to be listened to. And that immensely facilitates people's understanding across cultures.
Oh, thank you so much. You've made my lockdown. I'm beginning to think that this coronavirus is a blessing. We would never have been able to ask you to join us otherwise. Sarah, are you still there? Oh, I hope she hasn't got... Oh, there we... Well, what do you think?
Fantastic. Brilliant.
Thank you so much. Sarah will send you the details of the symposium in due course, and I know you'll be too busy to join, but you're very welcome to peep in, and I know there'll be a good response to that. Yeah, so we're quite what shall I say, not optimistic, but quite I've forgotten the English word, ambitious. So we're quite ambitious about this project, and that we hope we're bringing them all together, the teachers, the educationalists, the policy makers, the statisticians, you know, and we're putting them all in a temple of Zoom for 3 mornings and parts of the afternoon. And we hope that just by listening to the different ways of being involved in language, we'll get something out of it, you know.
I'm sure you will. Yes. Congratulations on.
Thank you so much, and not just for today, but if I just can say, I hope this doesn't sound too much like soap, as we say in Welsh, but you know, what you've written has really made my life richer, and it set me on a path, and there'll be no turning back now. So it's an honour to meet you. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Merci.